My grandson called me at 5 a.m. His voice was shaking like he'd seen something he shouldn't have. "Grandma, don't wear your red coat today," that's all he said. No explanation, just fear. I laughed. At first, how could a coat be dangerous? But at 9 a.m., when I got to the bus stop, the laughter froze in my throat. Police tape, sirens, a crowd whispering. And there on the cold pavement was a woman in a red coat, exactly like mine. That's when I realized my grandson hadn't been warning me about superstition. He'd been saving my life. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you are. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. If my story moves, you don't forget to subscribe. Every voice here matters, especially those who've been silenced or dismissed. My name is Eva-Laura Dane, and this is how one phone call changed everything I thought I knew about family, love, and survival. I woke before the rooster the way I do when the valley is still holding its breath. The vines were bare ribs against a low gray sky. The air in the barn tasted like dried grapes and iron. I checked the weather, marked the irrigation notes for next week, and set the property tax folder by the door 9 a.m. bus to Salem, in and out back before the noon wind. That was the plan until 5:03 a.m. when my phone lit the kitchen blue and my grandson's voice came through like a frayed wire. "Grandma, don't wear your red coat today. Please, you'll understand soon." "Jace, what happened? Where are you? Are you safe?" He dodged every question, asked for a promise, and hung up. I stared at the call time, the seconds still counting on the screen, and wrote it down in my pocket notebook, out of habit. 5:03, 31 seconds wind on the line and water somewhere far off like a river talking in its sleep. The red coat hung by the door, the one Frank surprised me with on my 60th, wine dark and bright enough to keep a truck from clipping me on fog days. I reached for it, felt my hand slow, and switched to the old olive work jacket instead. I packed the tax folder, my phone, a pen, the little spiral notebook leather gloves, and the dented thermos that still smells faintly of his cologne. On my way out, I glanced at the frame above the key hook, Frank smiling in the crush room, and Dean, as a teenager jaw, set the way it gets when he's about to dig in his heels. Lately, with Mira in his ear about unlocking the land's potential, there's been a polite distance in his eyes that feels colder than winter. The road to the bus stop runs past the cider apples and the ditch that never properly drains. By 9:00 a.m., Salem's outer stop was just as shabby as last week's three-sided shelter, old timetable, with half the digits burned out puddles reflecting a ceiling of cloud. But the color was different today. Red and blue flashes, yellow tape slung between posts, a field kit open like a surgeon's tray. "Eva-Laura, stay back," Sheriff Lucian Beck said, palm-up voice carved down to the professional edge I remember from his first month with a badge. "We've got a homicide approximately 6 this morning." I shouldn't have looked past him, but I did. The tarp didn't hide everything: an arm, the cuff of a sleeve, a color I know like my own name. Cherry red. My coat's twin. The breath left me in a hard little sound. The words from 5:03 slammed back into place, and everything in me went still except the part that understood I'd just stepped sideways out of someone else's aim. If I'd worn the red like I always do, the shape under that tarp might have been mine. I told Beck about the call, every syllable, the time, the wind, the faint rush of water. His face shifted from concerned friend to the squared-off mask he wears for a report. He clicked on the recorder and had me repeat it, while the forensics techs moved like quiet ghosts. No ID on the victim yet, he said no. Phone on scene. A few loose papers in her coat pocket we haven't opened. He asked me, who knew my scheduled bus days routes, how often I wear that red. Everyone I said and heard how dangerous that sounded in a small county. He nodded once. "I'm going to need you at the station for a formal statement." Before he walked me to his car, I let my eyes take the edges in. A drag of mud from the roadside to the shelter, not the kind a single pair of boots leaves, but a slick lane, like something heavy got pulled. A faint cordite tang that doesn't belong to diesel or damp wood. 2 deputies watching me with the same neutral interest they give a suspect who hasn't realized they're a suspect yet. Beck touched my elbow. "We'll take care of you, Ev." I believed him, and didn't both things true at once. If Jace knew enough to save me from my own coat, he was inside a storm I couldn't see. And whoever planned a red target had already painted me in their mind. The interview room smelled like old coffee and floor cleaner. Detective Coral Hayes, sharp eyes, steady hands, walked me through my morning in 15-minute blocks when I woke, what I ate, which jacket I chose, and why, who knows, I ride the 9 a.m. to Salem. I listed them: Dean and Mira, the bus driver who calls me Red even in July, Betty at the tax desk, my neighbor who borrows my post driver, anyone who's watched me cross the road 2 days a week for the last 5 years. Coral wrote highly visible routine and underlined it. Lucian came back with a name that hit the room like a dropped wrench. Victims: Talia Cortez. County Records Polk. He set a clear evidence sleeve on the table. Inside was a photocopy of my deeds stamped and notarized dated 3 weeks ago, transferring Dane Vineyards to Dean Rowan and Mira Rowan. I felt my mouth shape words that didn't come. "I haven't signed anything," I said when breath found me. Coral slid another sheet closer, my signature from the current deed side by side with the transfer. The loop on the E, the way the Dane leans like it's bracing against wind, perfect. Too perfect. My stomach dropped to that Christmas dinner where Mira waved a stack of ag policy updates under cinnamon steam, and I, proud idiot, signed where she tapped, because the roast was cooling and the timer was screaming and I hadn't put on my reading glasses. They arrived as if summoned by my regret. Mira had her worry face on soft voice, the type she uses with church ladies and cashiers. "Mom, this is awful. Maybe it's a sign you should rest. Selling would take so much off your plate." Dean stood behind her the way wind stands behind weather there, but not helping. Coral asked Mira if she knew Talia, who Mira blinked innocent so fast it squeaked. Honestly, Detective Evalora's memory isn't what it used to be. I didn't look at Beck, but I felt the way the air cooled between us. The lawyer I've used for a decade left a message right then, reluctantly withdrawing due to conflict. No explanation. 5 minutes later, a man in a perfect suit introduced himself as Gordon Lath, advising Dean and Mira. His tone was polite, the way a scalpel is polished. He spoke about care capacity and the court's duty to protect elders from stress-induced decision-making. He floated the phrase competency evaluation like a balloon he knew I'd hate to see. "Don't sign anything," Beck said, not quite under his breath, just the truth. My phone buzzed on vibrate. Unknown number, but it read like Jace short, urgent, threaded with a memory only we share. "Don't go home alone. They're watching. Meet me tonight. No red. Strawberry summer." The code shoved the air back into my lungs. I showed Beck. He couldn't confirm surveillance, wouldn't deny it either. "We'll drive you," he said. "We'll do this by the book." By then, the shape of the play was clear. The forged deed wasn't the finish. It was the lever. You tie up a woman's name on paper, you pry her capacity in court, you slide in a power of attorney, and you don't need her consent anymore. You only need her silence. I gathered my notebook, my pen, my old olive jacket. I gave Mira one long, plain look and watched the worry freeze on her face like the mask it was. Then I told Beck I was done answering questions for today, and I asked Coral if she'd be on shift tonight. "I will," she said. "Good, I'll have something for you." Outside, the rain had begun a fine Oregon mist that gets under collars and into bones. I pulled the jacket close and felt the weight of the little spiral against my ribs. The page I'd written at 5:03 was still damp from my thumb wind water time 31 seconds. It's funny what saves a life. Sometimes it's a grandson's broken whisper. Sometimes it's remembering to write everything down. Tonight I'd find Jace and we'd line the pieces up and I'd see the face of whoever thought a red coat would make me easy to kill. The old cider plant crouched by the river like a rusted animal, all wet wood and sour apples trapped in the boards. The gate hinge screamed when I eased it open. Above the loading bay, a dead motion light blinked and gave up, and a cracked security camera clicked without a red dot eyes that didn't see. Water hit the pilings under the bridge in slow punches. I kept my breath small and my steps smaller. One hand on the rail, the other over my phone to feel the vibro if Jace texted. He slipped from the shadow of a press like he'd learned how to become a shadow. Grandma. Up close, he looked older and younger at the same time, sleepless, jaw tight. I'm sorry. I should have told you days ago. I told him to start at the beginning and not spare me. He said he met Talia at a coffee shop near campus, how she knew county records backward, how she seemed like the first person who cared about keeping the farm in our name. She listened too closely, asked about our parcel history, my routines, which days I rode the bus, what I wore, so drivers would spot me. Then he saw her with Mira, downtown, restaurant glass throwing their faces back at him like a warning. He followed them once and watched papers change hands. After that, the sweetness drained out of it. Talia called him 2 nights before she died. Voice rattled, said it had gone too far, said she had a way to protect us if anything happened. She handed him a thumb drive in the parking lot behind a laundromat and then stopped answering. He pressed the drive into my palm. Here. It was cheap, scratch the kind a person buys with cash. We ducked behind a row of empty apple bins while I opened files on my phone. There were message exports emails between Mira, a deputy named Cal Drayton, and Gordon Lathe, talking in careful language about scheduling traffic patterns, ensuring no interference after recordation settling post-transfer contingencies. A folder at the bottom had a lock icon and a name that tasted like Home Seed Lot 47. Cypherlock wanted a passphrase. Jace had already thrown a dozen at it. None worked. Headlights washed through a seam in the doors, low and deliberate. Jace froze. Boots hit concrete. A voice called my name with practiced calm. Mrs. Dane, it's Deputy Drayton. Sheriff sent us to get you safe. Another voice scraped behind his too hard to be comfort. I slid my phone upside down in my jacket pocket with the recorder running and stepped where he could see my silhouette but not my face. If the sheriff sent you, I said he can call me. Cal's smile didn't reach his eyes. Cell coverage is spotty. Let's not take chances. Also, he cocked his head. Taking me in, then let the words fall out the way a person forgets they're being listened to. Good choice, ditching the red coat. He didn't flinch when he heard himself say it. He'd practiced the plan too many times to hear how much he'd just given away. Jace touched my sleeve now. We slid toward the stairwell, ducked into the basement, and shouldered the splintered door shut with a stack of sulfur-stained crates. Footsteps rained above us. Then the door handle rattled. I could feel Jace's heartbeat through the wood. An engine outside throttled down another set of boots, then Beck's voice level, as a spirit level. Deputy Drayton stepped away from that door. The next minutes were a tangle of orders, metal on concrete, a grunt the thud of someone who'd rather run than be seen. When Beck got us upstairs, Cal was pinned, and angry 2 other men, gone to the river path. You okay, Beck asked. I nodded and showed him my phone screen where Cal's words glowed on the waveform. He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders settled. It didn't last long. On our way out, my phone buzzed with a number I couldn't call back. Stop interfering. Tomorrow the court will question your capacity. Sign and we all walk away. Don't, and you'll lose everything. I pocketed the threat and looked at Beck. This drive is only the first door, I said. There's a locked room behind it. If I can open it, I can breathe. He said he'd log it and get it to someone who could try, but his eyes told the harder truth. Somebody inside his own house had greased the hinges for Cal. He arranged to take my statement at the station and move Jace somewhere off the map for the night. When the dark finally gave us back to the road, the river sounded closer than it should, like it was following. I kept the drive under my palm all the way home. By morning, the valley had that wet wool look it gets when the sky can't commit to rain. Beck had my recorder, Coral had my notes, and Jace was tucked where only 2 people knew. I drove the long way to the farm and saw it before the mailbox a pickup nosed into the trees below the lower block windows. Black engine, off the faint churn of a heater, fogging and clearing the glass. I didn't give it the courtesy of a second glance. I took the back steps, found new scratches around the front lock and a nick of metal on the jamb where a tool had slipped. In the office, the drawer with the tax copies felt too light. The folder was gone. The missing weight in my hands made my teeth hurt. They arrived 10 minutes later like kindness at the door. Mira in soft wool palms, out voice, warm. Dean with his eyes on the floorboards like he was afraid the floor would testify. "We were worried," Mira said. "Last night sounded so frightening. Thank God you didn't wear that red coat." The sentence landed like a knife, set softly on a table. I asked her where she learned the word deed, as if it meant love. She pivoted, talked about North Vale and modernization, about keeping me safe and solvent about amenities, like my soil hadn't earned its right to grow anything the old way. Dean opened his mouth and closed it. The space between his shoulders and his ears had the shape of guilt. I let them talk a minute longer than polite, then showed them out and locked the door twice. Frank's old desktop still limps to life if you ask it nicely. Dean used to run our tax software on it back when he still showed up with a socket wrench and a 6-pack on bottling days. I searched names I didn't say out loud and found a folder with a cheerful label, Invest North Vale. The spreadsheet inside didn't bother to hide. There were lines for minority stakes, disbursement schedules, the clean little squares of people who plan to make dirt into money. 2 names I knew sat under beneficial interest, Mira Cross and Gordon Lathe. That was the moment the future snapped into focus, not a sale to help me retire a transfer to themselves, laundered in paperwork and sympathy. I took the file to the kitchen table and called Jace from the landline we never unplug. We met where the river folds under the cottonwoods, a place with more wind than people. He'd slept 4 hours and looked like 2. Talia told me there was another drive, he said. Not this one. One she kept where she grew up, something about proof you can't argue with. He didn't know the address. He knew the story, a grandmother in Eugene, a small place with a horse stall she loved. If you want the truth to survive, you hide it in a memory no one else cares about. I told him about the truck down the hill, the lock, the empty drawer, the spreadsheet with Mira's name smiling back at me. His jaw clenched so hard it clicked. "We have to move now," he said. I knew he was right. Beck meant well, but someone under his roof had moved pieces for the other team, and every hour made the court angle worse. We agreed he'd bring the notes he kept. I'd copy the spreadsheet and leave the original where it sat so I'd know if someone came hunting. We picked a back route to Eugene that deer-like, and police don't. Dusk pressed in early. I loaded the thermos, the notebook, the copied file, the olive jacket, a flashlight that eats batteries like candy. When Jace slid into the passenger seat, he didn't speak. He pointed a finger just high enough for me to see the red dot gliding across the rearview glass like a fly. It vanished when I flicked the cabin light on and off. I cut the engine, waited, heard the faint shift of a shoe on gravel behind us, and the way a watcher holds his breath when he knows you've heard him. I turned the key back and let the truck roll downhill in neutral until we hit the bend, then eased right into the service lane that runs behind the hedgerow. We listened to the other car spin its tires on stone commit to the wrong direction and fade. On the county road, the river kept pace with us, loud where it squeezes around rock, then breathy where it sprawls. "They think you'll scare easy," Jace said finally. "They think age makes people slow." I smiled without humor and kept my eyes on the paint. I used to teach 10th graders to draw what's really there, not what they assume is there. I said, "I can still see, and I can still turn off the lights when someone points a dot at my back." We didn't speak again until the Willamette widened and the signs started saying, Eugene. Somewhere behind us, a pickup realized it had lost us. Somewhere ahead of us, a barn might be holding something that could save our land and everyone like us. I touched the pocket where the first drive lay, and for the first time since 5:03 a.m., I felt something like a plan. The road to Eugene narrowed to a single line of wet asphalt and fog. The rain was a whisper against the windshield, steady enough to keep us awake, but quiet enough to make every creak inside the truck sound too loud. Jace sat beside me, phone light faint on his face as he traced our path on a map. "She said her grandma's place was past the orchard line," he murmured. "It should still be standing." We turned off onto a dirt road slick with mud trees, leaning close like they wanted to eavesdrop. By the time we saw the barn, the night had already swallowed half the sky. It was more ruin than structure, a frame of beams, a sagging roof, the smell of damp straw and rust. I felt the age of it in my knees. Inside, the air held that mix of mildew and memory only old wood knows. We swept the flashlight over the stalls until the beam caught a word carved deep into one plank starlight. The name tugged something in me. I remembered seeing it in the locked folder on the USB Seed Lot 47 and felt the click of understanding, faint but sure. Jace pried loose one of the planks, and behind it a hollow sounded. Inside the gap was a small metal box no bigger than my hand, cool and slick. I opened it and found another drive silver this time with a faded sticker that read Ledger. Before we could breathe, headlights sliced through the mist. I killed our flashlight. The hum of an engine rolled closer, then stopped. 2 doors opened, one heavy one lighter. "Stay behind me," Jace whispered. The beam swept the barn interior until they found us. I saw Dean first stepping out of the light like he'd been waiting for the cue. Behind him, Mira moved, slow, deliberate, her umbrella folded like a weapon. "We didn't want it to come to this," Dean said, his voice shaking. "We just need to settle things peacefully." Mira's smile was calm, almost tender. Everything would have been simpler if you'd just signed Mother. The way she said Mother smooth practiced made the word sound like property. My stomach turned cold. Dean looked at me, and I saw it then, the small, cowardly truth that he had told her where I was. She pulled a folder from her bag. "Power of attorney," she said. "One signature, and this all goes away. Dean walks free. No trials, no shame. Just rest for you." Her tone was honey on a knife. I asked her if she could promise no one else would die if I signed. She tilted her head. No one dies when everyone stays quiet. My hand shook, not from fear, but from the effort of pretending it. "Give me the pen," I said softly. I reached into my pocket for it, pressing the record button hidden on its clip. I looked at Dean. Really looked at him. "Do you remember the night your father died?" I asked. "Do you remember what I told you about loyalty? That when you betray your own blood, the loss never leaves you." His eyes filled, but Mira cut him off, snapping, "Enough of this theater!" She snatched the silver drive from my hand. Jace lunged. The drive hit the dirt, crushed under her heel with a sound like a bone breaking. I threw the pen toward Jace, and he caught it clumsily. At that moment, the air outside exploded with light, and order Sheriff Beck's voice booming through a loudspeaker choral yelling for everyone to stay still. Officers poured through the doors, boots on wood flashlights carving the dark. Mira froze mid-step, eyes darting to the broken USB. Dean raised his hands, tears streaking his face. For a breath, it looked like it was over. Then Gordon Lathe stepped out from behind the patrol cars, holding a paper thick with stamps. "Temporary injunction," he announced smoothly. "No arrests, no seizures, pending judicial review. Lack of verifiable evidence. The digital drive is compromised." Beck's jaw clenched. Coral started to protest, but the order stood. They cuffed no one. By dawn, Mira was back in her car, Dean trailing after her, and the barn smelled of wet dirt and futility. The next morning, the headlines on local TV made me the fragile centerpiece elderly vineyard owner in custody for own protection. They called it Guardianship Review a Mercy Act. Beck was suspended for conflict of interest. Mira walked free, smiling for cameras that didn't know what they were seeing. Dean said nothing. They took me to a facility with white walls and soft floors, calling it a wellness evaluation. The door clicked behind me, and for the first time, silence felt like a cell. But I knew better than to break down. They could take my farm, my freedom, even my name for a while, but they couldn't touch what stayed inside my head. Memory was all I had left, and that I knew was what frightened them most. The room they gave me was white in every direction. White walls, white bedding, white noise humming from a vent. They called it Observation 48 Hours to prove whether my mind still belonged to me. The report on the clipboard by the door said I showed signs of paranoia and confabulation. I laughed at that. If they only knew how clearly I saw. The nurses kept their voices polite and brief, the kind used for someone already half gone. I didn't mind. It gave me time to plan. Above the ceiling camera, a red light blinked steady the heartbeat of someone watching. I could almost feel her eyes behind it, Mira's or whoever she paid to make sure I stayed contained. I wrote in my lap instead of on the table. Every fact, every voice, every time stamp. I rolled the pages tight and slid them into the hem of my sleeve. I called it my memory map. No one can erase what's written twice. During breakfast, a nurse named Marlene slipped me her phone under the tray lid. Coral said to check your messages, she whispered before she left. The screen lit up with a message. We cracked seed lot 47. Password was lot 47 coordinates. The file has video. Mira and Gordon fighting. She said Talia's dead because of her. Preparing submission for Judge Rowe. Need your confirmation before the hearing. My breath caught. Even buried behind locked doors, the world was still shifting outside. That afternoon, Mira came. She had Gordon with her and a stack of forms. Just talk, she told the guard, handing over an authorization paper. She's family. Her voice was sugar again. She brought a pie warm enough to smell of nutmeg and deceit. I baked it myself. Thought it might remind you of home. She set it down, eyes darting around the room. I saw the faint gleam under the crust, a listening device smaller than a coin. I smiled. That's kind of you, I said, settling into the role they wanted. I talked like an old woman losing track of her own stories. About harvest seasons mixed up, about forgetting Frank's birthday. Mira relaxed her mask, slipping just enough. It didn't have to be like this, she murmured. If you'd just signed, no one would have had to die, not even Talia. The moment hung in the air like static. She realized too late what she'd said. I shifted slightly, letting my sleeve brush the recorder pen clipped inside my pocket. Every word landed clean. When they left, I waited until lights out. The vents hissed softly. I took out the pen, plugged it into the wall terminal of the facility's old medical system. I remembered the access code because I was the one who'd taught it years ago during a student training program. Beck once joked that I could memorize a vault. He was right. The system wasn't built for security. It was built for orderlies who forget their passwords. I sent the file Mira's own voice straight to Coral's secure inbox, attached with the video from Seed Lot 47. Then I deleted every trace. The cursor blinked once and disappeared. Marlene brought breakfast early the next morning, eyes wide. They got it, she whispered. Coral and the sheriff are back in. She squeezed my hand before slipping away. For the first time in days, my chest loosened. Hours later, they came for me. 2 guards soft-tone procedural language. Court Order 1 said, transfer to Polk County for competency hearing. I didn't resist. In the van, the world rolled by in muted color gray fields, water pooling in ditches, the winter light flattening everything it touched. The radio was on low news static through static. Then the announcer's voice sharpened. Today the court will consider transferring guardianship of Evalora Dane to her daughter-in-law, Mira Rowan, pending mental competency results. The guard turned it down, maybe out of politeness. I didn't need it lower. I heard every word and smiled faintly to myself. I looked down at my lap where the notebook rested under my folded hands. Every page held the past 10 days like a map, calls coordinates, signatures, lies. Memory was the one courtroom they couldn't rig. The van hit a bump and the notebook shifted, catching a shard of sunlight. For a second, the gold edge flared so bright it almost looked alive. Tomorrow, I thought they'll finally hear what they have been pretending not to. And it won't be because of power or money or pity. It will be because I remember. Because I always remember. Room 204 smelled like paper-burnt coffee and old varnish. Fluorescent light flattened everything into white and wood. Mira sat beside Gordon Lath as if the table belonged to them. Dean kept his eyes on the floor 2 rows back. Coral and Beck took seats near the aisle, allowed to observe, not to argue. Judge Eldon Rowe adjusted his glasses, tapped the docket, and the room went still. Gordon stood first. He painted me as a woman adrift. Paranoia invented conspiracies. A red coat turned into a grand narrative. Mira dabbed her eyes and told the court I'd left burners on and mixed up pillboxes. I said nothing. I watched the second hand sweep toward 1047 and felt my breath line up with it. When the judge asked if I wished to respond, I rose. Your Honor, if the question is whether my mind is sound, let me answer the only way that matters by facts. My voice held. I gave him the clockwork of the last 10 days, the 5:03 a.m. Call from Jace, the bus shelter at 9:00, the red sleeve under the tarp, the drive marked Seed Lot 47, the night at the cider plant. Deputy Cal's words about the coat, the barn in Eugene, the pen that recorded what kindness would not, dates, hours, places, names. If you need corroboration, I said ask for it. Judge Rowe looked to the gallery. Coral lifted her hand slightly. He nodded. Beck carried a laptop to the evidence cart and plugged it into the court monitor. First came the audio from the facility, Mira's voice hushed and careless. If you'd signed that day, no one would have had to die. Not even Talia. Chairs creaked. Someone swallowed hard. Gordon half rose. Context he began, but the judge held up a hand. Next, Beck opened the decrypted folder. The video filled the screen, a room 2 people, their faces tight and unguarded. Gordon's voice. Talia is dead because of you, Mira. Mira. I didn't order a kill, you did. The sound of paper hitting a table. The frame stuttered, resumed, continued enough to make denial pointless. Gordon lunged for the power strip. Beck had already mirrored the file to a second machine. The judge leaned forward, the only motion in a room suddenly short on air. I took out my notebook and read the entries that matched the media to the minute. Every timestamp aligned. This is my mind, Your Honor, I said quietly. Not broken. Trained by work and grief and a lifetime of keeping a farm alive. The silence cracked when Dean stood. He didn't look at me. I signed papers I didn't read, he said, voice wet. Mira told me they were partnership forms. I handed her my mother's life because I wanted peace at my table. He looked up then, throat working. Mom, I'm sorry. Judge Rowe capped his pen with deliberate care. This is no longer a simple capacity review, he said. He ordered a recess and summoned the state's attorney by phone. When he returned, the shape of the day had changed. A bench warrant slid across his desk. A deputy set a hand on Mira's shoulder before she could reach for her bag. Another deputy turned Gordon's wrists, and the cuffs clicked like punctuation. Dean sank back into his seat and sobbed. In the aisle, Beck exhaled for the first time in an hour. The judge spoke last. Ms. Dane retains full capacity. Title to Dane Vineyards is restored immediately pending civil cleanup. Evidence relating to homicide and fraud is referred to state authorities. His gavel was gentle, which somehow made it hit harder. Outside the courtroom, Beck offered his hand. You remember, like a camera, Evalora. I shook my head. Cameras shut off when someone pulls a plug. Memory doesn't. Then I went home, not triumphant, just tired from proving what was true. Justice did not arrive with fanfare. It arrived in filings, hearings, and dates circled on a kitchen calendar. 3 months later, a jury returned a verdict that left no air in the room. Mira, cross life without parole. Gordon Lath, 25 years. Deputy Cal Drayton lost his badge before he heard his own sentence. Northvale Development folded under the weight of seizure orders. The land it planned to carve up was returned to the people who had earned their calluses. Dean filed for divorce, wrote a public apology, and signed every inheritance paper back to where it belonged, my name and a future line to Jace. We trimmed the dead wood at Dane Vineyards and tied new chutes to clean wire. The rows looked thin at first, then orderly, then hopeful. I kept the strawberry bed where Jace and I stained our hands when he was little. In the barn, I washed the red coat and stitched its torn pocket. I hung it under Frank's photo and wrote on a small strip of tape. This saved us, not to remember fear, but to honor waking up. One Saturday, Jace came home from campus with a canvas wrapped in brown paper. He leaned it against the crush pad and peeled it open me in oil, standing in the vines, with the coat like a bright flag sky low and silver behind me. "So you don't forget," he said, grinning at his own audacity. "Sometimes the thing that nearly takes you is the same thing that teaches you how to live." I pulled him close and felt our family line pulse thinner in places still unbroken. A package arrived from Coral, an external drive, with a tidy label and a note. "Keep this as a reminder not of what they did, but of how you beat it." I tucked it into Frank's old wooden box with his harvest journals. The point wasn't to reopen wounds, it was to keep a record that truth once had to fight. Beck stopped by in early summer, a paper sack of peaches in one hand and a padded envelope in the other. "I'm retiring," he said, voice lighter than I'd ever heard it. "Thinking about Idaho, but I'll miss this sky." He left the envelope on the table. Inside lay a scuffed badge. "I used to think justice only lived in offices like mine," he said. "Turns out sometimes it lives with a woman who never stops remembering." After he drove away, I set the badge beside Frank's photo. It looked right there. When the grapes turned soft and sweet, we harvested slow, careful, grateful. The first press bled into the trough and filled the yard with a smell that felt like a hymn. We worked until our backs warned us we were not 20 anymore. Then we sat on the porch and watched Oregon sky try to make up its mind. We're still here. I told the vines, the house, the ghosts. People say memory is a burden. Maybe it is. It is also a shield, a ledger, and sometimes a lighthouse. Mine saved a farm and a boy, and the part of me that refused to be erased. As long as I remember, justice doesn't die. It just waits for someone stubborn enough to carry it forward. Tomorrow we'll prune again. Next week, Jace will take the painting back to campus for a student show. And when I walk past the barn, I'll touch the sleeve of a red coat that used to mean danger and now means something else entirely. Stay awake, stay standing. Stay true.